Pounders, welcome back. Today we're going to be ripping through a weekly winners draft, but first we're going to look through Hayden's article that he just posted moments ago on the Twitter machine, as well as some of the different strategies that he's implementing this year versus last year, where we were mainly just going off of Bestball Mania data from BBM3 and trying to apply it to the first year the weekly winners had ever come out. So, Hayden Winks, welcome to the show. This is your baby contest, and it's awesome to see this thing fill.
Yeah, it's absolutely flying. It's actually pretty surprising. I thought Eliminator was going to be the more popular contest at that price point, and then Weekly Winner is going to fill, I think, pretty early. Like, I think middle of the August is kind of when it's on pace to fill, and people are playing it, and there's not a lot of content around it. I just listened to your stream with Pete on the After Dark going over Weekly Winners.
Yeah.
Michael Chang posted a nice thread about that. But aside from like you two, and I'm sure Salbus the Run is getting into it too, there's not that much content around it. So I wanted to go at least today and prep for the show, at least get some game theory aspects of like what I'm trying to do in this contest.
Hell yeah. 63.5%. It's picking up on the back end stretch here. Like you say, you think it's going to fill mid-August. So if you guys are interested in joining this contest, like I'd get ahead of it because it is going to fly, especially as we get a little deeper into the off season. If you want to start, we could pull up your article. You start here with the play for the early season schedule, pre-bye weeks, and then week 5 and week 6. Can you explain what we're doing here?
So the ADP kind of started based off of like Bestball Mania ADP, and that contest is really back weighted because that's where the prize money is. So weeks 15, 16, 17, that's where Bestball Mania is drafted. So a lot of the rookies get pushed up. Players that have some suspension risk, they still go relatively early just because we're playing for the late season. In weekly winners, every week is the exact same in terms of the price structure. So if you're asking me which week am I the most confident in my player projection, it would be week 1 followed by week 2 all the way down until week 17. So for me, I want to play into where I feel most confident in my projections, and I can take advantage of some of the ADPs that won't apply to me in that exact structure. So somebody like Chuba Hubbard becomes more valuable to me rather than Jonathan Brooks, but to another drafter, they're still going to draft Jonathan Brooks fairly early. And then for week 5 and week 6, I just found it interesting that if you are looking at those 2 bye weeks, that's the beginning of the bye weeks in the NFL, it's all the best players. 17 of the top 38 players in weekly winners ADP have a bye in week 5 and in week 6. So if I focus on teams that don't have buys in week 5 and week 6, I'm taking 6 weeks at the calendar, and I'm saying these are the 6 weeks where my edge is going to be the highest than it is in the back half of the season. And the other advantage, instead of like backloading your teams, you could draft a Jonathan Brooks and Rashee Rice team in case he gets suspended for later in the season. But those teams would look bad in week 1 no matter what. If you do play for the early part of the schedule, there's a chance that you just run hot the entire year. So to me, the biggest strategy is to play for the early season schedule. And I do think that not picking players that have week 5 and week 6 buys is kind of like the added wrinkle on top.
I love that. That is such a it's not even a small nuance. Like that's huge. Have 17 of the top 38 in ADP with those 2 bye weeks. That's amazing. In the first round, like even like a much smaller nuance would be like CMC versus like the next 2 best RBs. You have Bijan and you have Brees, and those 2 guys are both on the same bye week. So maybe playing for week 12 when you have a CMC start is interesting. It sort of goes along the same game theory, just in a different way. I love that, and I'm definitely gonna be building a few teams and donate a certain amount of my portfolio to trying to conquer that strategy.
And one way you can do it is just pull up the week 5 schedule. So you're not going to draft any teams with a week 5 or week 6 bye, and then you're going to only stack teams that play each other in week 5 and week 6, and that's like how you create the most leverage in those weeks. So I think it's kind of fun to like pull up 1 week of the year and kind of just like, all right, I'm gonna have a good EV every single week, but in this week, like this is like my sweet spot week where I know for a fact that since I have a full roster, all 18, no teams on buys, I'm taking the projections that I feel best about early on the
Hmm.
season, and then hopefully other teams are not following suit, and then all of a sudden, when week 6 does come around, my EV is twice as greater than like the normal team.
Right. In this contest is such like hit the nut outcome.
Yep.
How do you get the most EV in game stacking? We know obviously from the week 17 bros is a way to get there. Um, yeah, I love it. I love it. If you guys want to get this article again, I just threw the link in the live chat. I'll put it in the description of the video as well. And I love this one too, is build robust RB teams. And this is something that the data I pulled from the top 10 teams last year,
Yep.
every single week, 1 through 17, really hits home because RB is filling the flex a lot more than you guys think, whether
Yep.
you draft wide receiver to the flex or not. So I actually love this article bit that you have here, and leaning into that early investment capital at the position, I think is super smart as well. Do you want to run us through this?
So I've seen the same thing for every single season where the running backs fill the flex spot over the wide receivers, especially versus like what the narrative of the two would be.
Right.
And then that's especially true early on in the season when we feel really good about our running back projections. Obviously, running backs have injury risk. There is also some benching risk at
Hmm.
that position, but players very rarely get benched weeks 1 through 4 or 5. Like even
Right.
like Chuba
Right.
Hubbard, Miles Sanders, who was really bad,
Yeah.
that took a little bit of time for that actually to play through. So the best way to handle that is to just draft a bunch of the early running back and fill the flex spot with a running back. And if you do that, don't draft more running backs. So you can build a hyper fragile team, but you can even expand on that even further and draft 3 running backs really early and kind of stop it there. Because weekly winners is really a game of diminishing returns where whichever position you draft early, you have to stop drafting them. I don't care which position it is. It's all 4 of the positions. If you've drafted a player from that the first 5-ish rounds, you do need to be uh kind of targeting the other positions there. So to me, I just want to be drafting a bunch of like the Najee Harris types and really go for that flex spot being a running
Hmm.
back there. Even with the running backs being a little bit priced up compared to Bestball Mania, I do think there's a reason for that.
I like it. And here we'll actually bounce back and forth to the data that we've pulled,
Such good
and
data.
and what you're saying to give people even another visual of it. And like so hyper fragile, like obviously not as many people are doing it, so it's going to relate lower in the stat sheet, but it doesn't mean it's minus EV. It just depends on how you are actually how you're actually drafting it.
And
But yeah,
last year's just like slate in general, it was so 0 RB heavy. So just
yeah.
compared to like the normal season that plays out, you're not going to have as many Mostert, A Chain, Kyron teams out there. Like that was a very extreme back weighted running back season where it could just be flipped this year, where it's CMC, Brees, and Kyron in the first 3 rounds. You have to have those guys, and then Najee Harris goes crazy as well. And it's not
Hmm.
about the Jaleel McLaughlin types that break out kind of out of nowhere. So I think like this is like at the worst, it's going to look like against the running backs just based off how 2023 played out.
I love that so much. All right, here's what's hitting the flex early, late, mid, which is interesting. Tight ends, wide receivers 1 through 5. So if you're drafting receivers, uh, 4 through the first 5 rounds, what percent are they actually all hitting the lineup?
Mm,
17%. So it seems like that sweet spot is actually 3 receivers through 5 rounds, hitting it 44%. Um,
that makes
Type
sense.
of running back exactly. And a lot of this is sort of mirrored through the data you pulled as well. Um, what I'm looking for is the RB. So, and again, you mentioned diminishing returns, right? And 5 running backs, 6 running backs at 39% of the teams that finish top 10 weeks 1 through 17 go to 7 RBs. It drops 28%. Now, there's a lot less teams drafting 7 RBs, but it's not this much. It's not this much. So the diminishing returns at 7 RBs, the diminishing returns at 9 receivers. And this is the contest. Even last year, people are going 1 QB, people are going 1 tight end. So there are more 9 wide receiver teams than typical. And the drop off of 20% here is extremely telling as well at receiver. So leaning into that early capital again is super important.
It was weird. If you go back to you said 3 through round 5 for the wide receivers, was the one that kind of hit the lineup. So yeah, 44% of the time you had 3 wide receivers through 5, all 3 of them hit. So it's about half of it. And I think that's like a high enough percentage where you do want to be playing for that exact outcome. In 3 through 5, it follows like the kind of the theory that if you build a starting lineup in your first 7-8 rounds, like, to me, that makes sense. Like, that is completely optimizing for the law of diminishing returns. And going to the wide receivers, I've seen like the buckets of what's optimal, or like what you can make optimal in weekly winners by position is greater. So I think 1 quarterback teams could work depending on when you draft the quarterback. 4 quarterback teams could also potentially work. Same thing with the running backs, 3 through to 8 running backs, depending on how you build it out. Makes sense. I like more running backs early because I want to play for the early season outcomes. And then that means that you can draft more wide receivers late. But it really kind of depends on who your first couple draft picks are. I think even more so in weekly winners than in Bestball Mania. And it's all obviously very true in Bestball Mania as well.
So now, after a certain point, and even with your elite QBs, I think you agree with this. When you're going like an elite QB, and you have it in your article, like top 50 pick, just about, so like around A-Rich, basically.
Yep.
You're only going 1 QB. Let me give you the scenario. If you have, and this is probably not the highest ceiling scenario, but if you have Olave, like you are investing a good amount into that offense, you're investing a good amount into Carr, whether you like it or not. Would you be opposed to bringing in Derek Carr in a situation like that at the end of drafts versus, a random 17th, 18th rounder that isn't obviously likely to hit your lineup?
And who's my first quarterback?
Your first QB is going to be, let's say, Josh Allen.
I would only draft the Josh Allen team. So I think you want to kind of think of it the other way around, where if Derek Carr is the guy that you need for that week, which out of like the last 5 quarterbacks, they're going to combine for maybe 1 to 2 weeks this season where they do finish quarterback 1. It will happen this year. So one of these really bad quarterbacks will finish as a quarterback 1. In that team, let's say it is Derek Carr. Would you rather have Josh Allen or a 4th round pick? You definitely want the 4th round or the 3rd round pick in weekly winners. So I think you got to take either one side or the other. I think like if you have Caleb Williams as your first quarterback, I do think then you would be drafting a Derek Carr type, just because the value of the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th rounds is so much higher. It's like really like an exponential chart. So I would want the 3rd round pick, not as a quarterback. Even if Chris Olave is the guy you need, hopefully Josh Allen's the guy you need at the other position. So I think my cutoff would be somewhere around the Kyler Murray. I think I would draft Derek Carr somewhere in there.
Okay.
But I think with Anthony Richardson, even I would rather have the 5th round pick and kind of subtract the odds when it is Derek Carr as the quarterback 1.
I do agree with that. And then maybe even if I said like Jalen Hurts, who like obviously, so Josh Allen, like Derek Carr doesn't even cover the bye week. So maybe if it was another QB, it'd even be like a little more tricky, but I still agree with the preface there. If you guys want to get this data as well, I have it linked in my Discord for free. It's just in the cheat sheet section. Here's which position hit the flex. And of those 170 teams, RB hit the flex 60% of the time, almost doubling the wide receivers.
Yep.
And it didn't matter that a lot of drafters were actually drafting wide receiver to the flex. How many wide receivers in the first 5 picks and then basically what percent of those hit. So, drafting one, it went 7-7. So of those teams, like 7 that one receiver didn't hit, 7 it did. So about 50-50. Drafting 2, none hitting. 3 actually
Never
got
happened.
there, which
Yeah.
is like super impressive,
Yeah.
especially for the nut outcome contest. Now, 1 hitting was 15, and then both hitting doubles it at 30. So of
Right.
course,
That makes
it tells
sense.
you like lean into that early capital.
Mhm.
Same thing with 3 receivers. Now, 6 of the 75, only 1 hitting. 2 is the most at 67%, 47 of the 75, and then all 3 hitting the lineup was 22. So under one third, 29%. Very, very, very interesting data. And shout out to Best Josh in the Discord who helped make this visually look really nice. And yeah, we end up
So
pulling we do the back breaking work, pulling the data, and he put this together. And
there you go.
yeah, great. It takes a village sometimes. It takes a village.
Mm-hmm.
How many fewer running backs than wide receiver? Let's see if I can remember what he did here. Which position ended up being the flex? So if you had 1 fewer running back than receivers, running back again still hitting. So it's not like teams like this data shows like, oh yeah, they had 8 running backs
Yep.
had higher chance. 1 more running back than receiver, it's still running back hitting the flex. 2 fewer running backs than receivers, still
Running
it's
back.
RB hitting the flex.
Mm-hmm.
2 more RBs. This was an interesting one. Obviously, you're not going to have too many teams like that, anyways. 3 fewer running backs, and now it starts to get a little closer.
Yep.
Which is probably shows good balance.
And that would probably those teams that have 3 fewer running backs. I mean, there's only so many of those in the first place, but I think like that's the type of build that I'm going for, where I have a bunch of wide running backs early, and then I stop drafting them, and then I'm kind of skewing it where I have a lot more tight ends and wide receivers than my opponents do.
I like that. Yeah, so that could be a
Like the four
hyper
fewer
fragile.
Yeah, 4 fewer running backs. It says 65% of the time it is going to be one of the running backs that goes into flex. That's the cohort of teams that I'm going for, like that 65th percentile. Maybe even this is 89%, but
Yeah.
5 fewer running backs. Those are the teams I'm going for there. And then I'm just hoping that the 3 running backs I draft, they don't have to stay healthy the whole year. I just need them to be 1, 2, 3 in week 4, and then like the rest of weekly winners is paid for.
Right. Yeah, you only have to be right once.
I know.
Some of the other interesting data that we pulled here is, double stacks. The parlay, which it would basically just like taking the QB naked, the single stack, and then the triple stack, which is like it's basically Miami last year at this point. And then actually breaking it down into pocket QBs versus the rushing QB. So the pocket QB double stacked at 22.5% makes sense. The naked pocket QB still 20%. And what I did notice is a lot of the time that QB is somehow falling into the end zone. A few of these were Jordan Love. A couple of them were like Purdy because he spread the ball so much. Goff, same thing. Just so many weapons that he could spread the ball and still get there. But typically falling into the end zone at least once here. The single stack, 45%. And you bring this up in your article. And again, this goes into diminishing returns, where if you're overstacking, everyone was guilty, of this last year for the Chiefs.
Of course.
For the Giants, it was like, I'll just take a bunch of these guys late. And this year, I want you to think of it as like early investment capital. So like if you're going AJ Brown, it's probably not best to go Devonta Smith, right? If and they did line up last year a little better. But like where your investment's so heavily in AJ Brown being, wide receiver top 3, it's really tough, especially on what type of offense you're drafting these players on. Philly wants to run. It's really tough for them both to get there. And you're actually making a bet against one another. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think this is really, really big for weekly winners. just because there's only so many passing yards, passing touchdowns available in a single game outcome, and you really want them to go to the wide receiver that you drafted early. So I looked at some data here. Only 1% of teams had a pair of wide receivers score more than 20 half PPR points, like both of the wide receivers. Only 1% of teams do that in a game. And then only 0.2% of teams had a pair of wide receivers score more than 25 half PPR points. So that basically never happens. It can happen in theory. T. Higgins and Jamar Chase both do that, but really we should not be playing for that because people draft that way more times than it actually happens. So we'll just let them win those weeks where it does happen, and we'll take the other weeks where Jamar Chase was the guy you need. And then I would rather take the other round 4, round 5 wide receiver over T. Higgins there. And I think the best way to kind of compare this to weekly winners from Bestball Mania is the bar for your team to cash is so much higher in weekly winners because you're trying to come for a top 1 percentile outcome or even higher than that. So your wide receiver needs to hit 25 fantasy points to win this thing. To advance from the regular season in Bestball Mania, it's nowhere near that. Like your wide receiver 3 needs to have 14, 15 points to kind of be on pace. So that 10-point gap is enough for the highest outcome teammate correlation to kind of disappear versus in season long, you do want the teammate correlation a lot more. And I think the other thing I found out with this is running back ceiling correlations do not match up with any of his teammates when we're talking about the highest outcome. So over the course of the season, Mixon and Stroud, you want them together because Stroud makes the Texans the best offense in the league. Joe Mixon will have weeks where he's scoring touchdowns. But on the same week, it's going to be a little bit harder there. Of course, it can happen, but I think people tell themselves a story that the wide receiver goes crazy and then the running back in the second half goes crazy as well. It really doesn't happen like that. There's really no correlation. People draft like that's the case all the time. So save your kind of huge teammate correlations for traditional best ball. And then this one, we just need the skinny stacks, which to me, most of the time is the best pass catcher on the team with the quarterback. Because it's really hard if you draft the quarterback and you're like, oh, the third wide receiver is going to be how the quarterback finishes first. It's hard for the third receiver to be efficient enough where your quarterback is actually going to be the quarterback 1 on a week. So really, to me, it's like best wide receiver and the quarterback as many times as possible.
Definitely. The contest is already so hard to hit. Like, don't make it harder on yourselves. And you can see, even with the pocket passing QB, it only getting there 3 times out of the 124 pocket QB spikes. It's already so
hard.
tough.
Yeah.
The RB, this is the Tua. Like, this is Tua, Mostert, and Achane.
Against the Broncos. It's probably all 5 from that single game.
Yes. No, it is.
Yeah.
It is. But mainly, like you said, the QB single stack, especially that early investment, if it's high, you don't want to be doubling down on T. Higgins and making a bet basically against Jamar Chase having that 3 touchdown game.
Yep.
But
it's also interesting.
You are okay with like adding like Jermaine Burton in that case though.
Yeah.
He could still hit the flex.
Once you get the cost down, then it becomes a little bit better. I still don't love it. Like, to me, like, you have Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, like 3 touchdowns to Jamar Chase, please. Like, that's the best outcome potential there. Now, the data does support something I wrote about as well, is where if you are going to have a second second teammate with your quarterback, it is the tight end, and it's very simple analysis here. In order to hit your starting lineup at tight end, the threshold is a lot lower than it is at wide receiver 3. The wide receiver 3, you're going to need 20 half PPR points. At tight end, that only might be 14, 15, depending on the week. And in that instance, there is enough production within the offense to have a 30-point wide receiver and a 15-point tight end. It's a much harder to have 25 points twice at the wide receiver position. And the second thing is tight ends go later in drafts than the wide receivers. So Jamar Chase plus Mike Gesicki with Joe Burrow, that's the route I would rather go than T. Higgins or Jermaine Burton. Also, shout out Andre Yoshivas. Apparently, he's going to be a spot wide receiver down there. Goes completely undrafted. So maybe if you want to go nuts, it's Yoshivas and Mike Gesicki. But I do think that's too much into the Bengals in general.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Someone going at pick 5. Yeah, I do like you said, like the threshold for tight end to spike into the lineup is much less than the double receiver, and you're even seeing it with the pocket QB, double
Yep.
wide receiver. It's 2x to grab the tight end
Hmm.
instead. Um, yeah, it really is like some of this data, like you will get fluctuation in this data, but I don't think you're going to see something that is wildly different.
Hmm.
Even with what was it, about 60,000 less teams this year, 80,000 less teams?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, and then
I,
the other thing is, if you're looking at historical data, there's a chance that the threshold to finish as a tight end one on a week is lower this year because the elite tight ends don't project as well as the previous season elite. So, like for example,
mm,
like Travis Kelsey, if you can say you can pick any Travis Kelsey stat line throughout his career, this it would be I'll take the 2022 Travis Kelsey, not the 2024 Travis Kelsey. There is no prime Gronk, there is no prime Darren Waller, all those guys. Even there's no prime George Kittle at this point. So maybe even though there's more elite tight ends, they're not going to project as well as the previous elite tight ends, where those guys like consistently were having 20-point games. There could be a lot of seasons or a lot of weeks this year where McBride and Kincaid finished tight end one, tight end two, but they're only get finished with 16 and 15 half PPR points instead of
mhm.
like prime Kelsey. It's like, good luck. He had 26 points. It's over.
Right. So the separation isn't there. Where are you on the strategy of elite tight ends, elite? Well, we know
Mhm.
where QBs. You're stopping at 1. Tight ends last year. Let's see where it is. We had when was that tight end drafted? And I
Mhm.
think some of this data is actually pretty interesting because of the strategies that were talked about last year. Like go 4 late,
Yep.
go 3 late, and you had Laporta, and we actually pull how many teams hit that were Laporta in this. Um, Early tight ends still did pretty well, and you had the Kelsey, down year, especially for cost. Like
Mhm.
at one point, people were like the hysteria of him. Like, is he the 101? Because you're only going one tight end, and then you had Andrews go down as well. But
Mhm.
early tight end still getting there 31% of the time. I thought this was a surprise for me when I was pulling this data.
Yeah, but how many teams had I don't know what your definition of early was. That could have been 60% of the teams had an early tight end. So that could have been like
It was
only
basically
halfway,
under. I want to say it was under ADP 60 when I did this. So like Kyle
including
Pitts was in there, who
Kittle.
also had, yeah, Kittle was definitely in there.
Yeah, and then Mark
Kittle's definitely in
Andrews, who
there.
didn't do much. So yeah, I think that's about right. This year I think just in general, I like the middle tight ends a lot. Like I like
Mm-hmm.
David
Oh
Njoku,
God, yeah.
and Ferguson, and I do
Bowers.
like Pitts. Uh, Bowers is tough for me in weekly winners because I'm so
Yep.
early season production that I would rather just take Njoku
Got it.
than those types as well.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it really is just going to depend on the season. Like anything with 1 year samples of tight end gets really tricky because there's only so many tight ends that even matter in fantasy. That I
Mm-hmm.
really want to try to take like what is my projections for this upcoming season. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be more predictive than what happened last year just because the sample size gets so wonky. And the other thing is like if I'm drafting 3 running backs early, I got to draft some position a lot of times. So that's
Right.
probably
Right.
going to
Right.
be the quarterbacks and the tight ends. Um so yeah, I think it's difficult. I don't have
Yeah.
a great answer to be honest.
You are seeing again like common theme for this contest, diminishing returns. Like after 3 tight ends, going from 48%, which yeah, there's more 3 tight ends than 4, but people were building 4 tight end teams a lot last year. Still, for it to drop 38% is sort of telling with the diminishing returns. Obviously, really hard for the tight end to hit the flex anyways. So you're sort of probably like 98% of the time you're taking 2+ zeros.
Mhm. I think that's
Now,
fine if it's really late.
yeah,
And,
you're
and
at
there
least taking 1 0. But like the 3 tight ends here, it claims that it is okay. And of course, like we had Laporta smash on the back, but it was only 17 of the 80.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's random tight ends that spike out of nowhere. Like
Yep.
every single year, Joe Burrow has the worst tight end, and in one week they score 2 touchdowns, and all of a sudden you need them. Hunter Henry,
Yeah.
Juwan Johnson, like there are guys, and I do think when like I was going through my tight end projections, 17, 18 round picks, like the tight ends just like project for more points than the receivers do. Like the receivers that we draft in those last 2 rounds, a lot of the times they're the wide receiver 4 on their own team. Like they might not even play, and at least the tight end is on the field a lot of the time. So
Right.
uh I think I would like the um doing 3 and 4 tight ends. And I
Mhm.
think at this point, the elite tight ends go late enough where like if I do have Kyle Pitts, I'm definitely drafting a second and probably even a third elite or a tight end in general, just
Yeah.
because we're talking about 6th round, 7th round picks. And I think at
Mhm.
that point, we're kind of banking on the running backs and wide receivers we drafted early. And I got to draft some position that's going to be giving me zeros every week. And I think that even if Kyle Pitts does have a big season, I think it's going to be way more up and down than a lot of the running backs and wide receivers in the first 6 rounds. So Kyle Pitts got 3 awesome weeks, but the other weeks he might not do as much. And typically, the wide receivers just provide a little bit more of a consistent kind of baseline throughout the season.
I like that. I like that. And there's so much you could pull from it. And guys, give Hayden's article a read. This is going to just shore up your strategies on weekly winners. The link is in the comments. I'm going to add the link to the description as well.
So,
Anything else from the article that you want to cover before ripping a draft?
yeah, number 4, I think something that's important. Just talking about how to get unique, and uniqueness does matter. Especially in weekly winners, because you have to think about it. Uh, there's almost 16,000 teams, or teams that will have the player that you need. So, like, let's say Jamar
Mm-hmm.
Chase is the guy that you need. There's almost 16,000 Jamar Chase teams. Only 4,000 of them will cash. You will need to get unique somehow to separate yourselves. So that could easily be where instead of Jamar Chase on the Jamar Chase team in round 2, you reach on somebody that's not paired with him very often, and like all of a sudden you have Jamar Chase with somebody that typically goes like, let's say 25th in ADP, and they're just not going to be on the same team as often. But the best way to do that is later on in the draft, scroll down and draft players that aren't drafted 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a chart in there that kind of shows you how quick the drop off is. But typically in like round 15, 16, I only want to be drafting players with an ADP that starts with the 2. I want like
Mm-hmm.
208, 220, 212, like that kind of ADP range. That's where the drafted rate really drops off. And the projected points drop off is not that great. So like an example would be like instead of Jermaine Burton, draft Yoshi Voss. Yoshi Voss gets
Mm-hmm.
drafted 1% of the time.
Perfect.
Jermaine Burton gets drafted 100% of the time. Do I think Burton's going to outscore Yoshi Voss? Maybe so, but I'm not really confident in that. And I would
Right.
rather take the 99% drafted rate discount. So
Right.
it's little things like that where maybe in Best Ball Mania, I just want, all right, here's my player takes. I just kind of want to stick with them. But in
Mm-hmm.
this, the floor doesn't matter. And we're really playing for an outcome one time throughout the season, you being right. And I think at that point, you do want to kind of really push the lever on the low drafted players. So anyone with an ADP above the 210, I think that's like a really good cohort to kind of target, especially in this format.
And at that same time, when you're doing that, like let's say Houston's offense, just because there is a spike week guy, Noah Brown, and when he does have his 1 week where he spikes, you are leveraging the other elite pieces on Houston, which are all expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So like looking at it from a team perspective as well is interesting. But we did sneak into a draft. We're in the comfy 8 spot. Shout out to Logan here at 2, Benny at 6. Scantron, I believe, is a pounder as well at 7. And then we might have the back to ourselves here.
Sweet. I have a player take for you for weekly winners.
Let's hear it. I love it.
Sam Darnold, absolutely the best pick on the board. Sam Darnold.
You're targeting again. You're on brand. You're targeting weeks 1 through 6. It makes a lot of sense.
Doesn't get drafted. He runs. We know that the offense has. We've seen Nick Mullins and Dobbs and a bunch of guys come out of nowhere in this offense. So every single time I have a Justin Jefferson, I'm drafting Sam Darnold, and it's enough where I think Sam Darnold's so obviously a great pick in this, where if I do have Justin Jefferson, I'm kind of skipping out on the Jalen Hurts guys if they're available in round 4, because I want to make sure I get saved up for the other.
Curious who you're going here. I'm assuming it's between Bijan and AJ Brown.
Let's go AJ Brown. I have AJ Brown ranked higher than Bijan in my rankings. If we can get Jalen Hurts here, awesome. And
is this separate, just weekly winners rankings, or are you talking about
those are my season-long rankings. Yeah, the only issue that I have with AJ Brown is he does have the week 5 bye, so we can't play for that exact strategy this time. I would say like let the first 2 rounds play out, and if you kind of dodged those week 5 and week 6, then like that's the team that you want to be drafting there.
I like it. And guys, I haven't told you yet, but go down, slap the like on the live stream. If you guys enjoy the content, hit the subscribe button. We are doing a 24-hour live stream if we can hit 2K subs before NFL kickoff, and it's going to be a close one. It's going to be a close one. If you want to see that, make sure you subscribe and make sure you give Hayden a follow. I'm sure you guys are all already following him, but his link and information is in the description of the video. Second round. I'm probably dragging Achane up to 13 in this contest. I'm curious where you're going here.
I'd be fine with that. Saquon, Achane, or Kyron would be kind of my go-tos.
Definitely, probably never starting Barkley and AJ Brown. Seems like an absolute nut outcome that we're looking for. But especially if it's chalk too, like on ADP, it makes me want to do it even less.
Our team is an example why we should be building for week 5 and week 6 bye weeks, because Achane week 6, AJ Brown week 5. So like on another team, just kind of like really maybe even upload rankings without all of the week 5 and week 6 buys, and cancel out half or like 25% of the player pool and build teams like that. Because if you look, the first, second, and third round, it is just all guys that are not going to be playing. So if you go out for those weeks, we're the fish in this draft. It's so hard to like wrap your head around it, but I do think it is a good strategy for another build.
And same point. I gotta take a sip of water here. We might lose it here on the live stream. Still getting over the daycare variant of the week.
Oh boy.
By week 12, by week 14. So like if we could just not take one of the two, obviously the 2 heaviest weeks, you could target the other one just by having none of the bye week 14 guys. So like you could sort of tell, like, and this is where you let your early draft pick sort of dictate where you're going and what strategy you're going to pursue in this contest, because there's so many different strategies that you can basically enlist in this.
And you could say on this team, we're going to draft all the week 5 and week 6 buys. We will have 0 EV in those 2 weeks. And then the other weeks we'll have a little bit of a leg up. But I still want to kind of think through the players that we think are going to project best early on in the season, weeks 1 through 4. And really kind of just chop off the Jonathan Brooks type of players here.
Right. And that's a whole nother, like, player prototypes, the player outlook. When are they going to start getting ramped up? Are you targeting the mid end of the season? Are you targeting again, like the early season, like you like to do? And yeah, I can't wait to now do 20 drafts and just donate it right towards weeks 1 through 6 after this.
Yeah. You gotta take out all the week 5 and week 6 players in your rankings and just
what a
say,
challenge.
Right, those guys don't exist.
Poor Ben. Shout out to Ben Pounder in the live chat. Said like, please, he's like, chill out on targeting week 6. He basically built, I believe, all 100 or 150 teams that he did just on this 1 week where he felt he had the highest edge. So
that's hilarious.
That RIP, bro.
I like
RIP.
It makes sense.
It does. You're 1 week off. You should have targeted week 7.
Yeah, it really is just crazy how just random bye week scheduling is, and then how it's like all the best players in fantasy just happen to be on those 2 weeks.
Really cool nuance that you found there.
And then there's like no week 8,
much less, but
there's no week 8 buys this year. There's only 2 teams on week 7. So I think like kind of like the first 8 weeks of the schedule are like kind of the ones I really want to focus in on. But player takes also matter too. So don't get too crazy trying to be a schedule bro. If you happen to draft the guy that finishes RB1 6 times this year in the third round, that's going to be the guy you want. Schedule be damned.
Right. On a team like this, would we be more willing to bring in someone like Malik Neighbors if we're already, you know, by week 5, giving up basically week 5 in week 6? But if we get a falling Mike Evans, this could be interesting too.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, to me, this would be Mike Evans just because
Yeah.
he's not going to be on AJ Brown, Devon Achane teams very often because he fell so many draft picks down. And obviously, we know Mike Evans is going to ball out in the first 4 weeks.
That's the other thing. Like combinations, I want to stress this a lot, especially if you've been tracking ADP and you know, okay, this guy wasn't going at 34 and now, you know, you're trying to pull him up to 15 or something.
Yep.
So if you're keeping track of ADPs, good on you. It's going to give you a big advantage. I think that's the easiest way to leverage this contest is getting different through the first 3 rounds.
Yep.
Your investment is already so heavily tied. Your spike weeks are already so heavily tied to hitting in the first 3 rounds. If you can get a different combination, whether it's like whatever, if you want to drag down Waddle and Devontae Adams to the 12-13 spot, do something weird where it's like you have 2 players in a similar range. How much EV are you giving up by not drafting like Puka there?
Yep.
It's
I don't think
to get different and leverage that many teams. It's 100% worth it.
So definitely not Devontae Smith.
Mm-hmm.
I like Josh Jacobs. Early season schedule. We want the running backs early. Like to me, this is Amari or Josh Jacobs would be my 2.
Ooh, you're
or
giving me
Tank,
the
or
option of
Tank
Amari?
Dell, or Tank Dell.
I like Tank Dell too, leveraging some of those. Yeah. I like one of these too.
All right,
I'll let you make it.
Amari.
All right.
Let fate take it. Yeah, okay, so we get Amari. Yeah.
Just keep switching.
I think Deshaun's going to pass the ball way more than people think. I think if you just look at what the Browns have done the last couple off seasons, they trade for Deshaun Watson, they trade for Elijah Moore, they trade for Jerry Jeudy, they sign Amari Cooper and David Njoku to big contracts. They aren't expecting Nick Chubb to be out there early part of the season. Down the stretch last year, they finished number 1 in neutral pass rate after Nick Chubb goes down, after DTR and PJ Walker leave the starting lineup. It's an analytics-based front office. They've even drafted in the 3rd round Cedric Tillman and David Bell. They did not have a lot of draft picks those years and more wide receivers in round 3 as well. So everything that they're doing, Jerome Ford is their number 1. He's more of a pass catcher than a true running back, like between the tackles rusher. So I think they're just going to pass the ball a ton this year. So I think the Browns, Amari Cooper, David Njoku, Deshaun Watson, I do think is one of the teams that I do think qualifies for the not doing the skinny stack, adding on the tight end. I think like the Browns could be like a good definition of 4th round draft capital at wide receiver, 8th round, 9th round draft capital at tight end is probably as much into one team as I'm willing to draft. And I think I'm willing to make that exception, especially because I think the Browns offensive philosophy is going to change this year.
Yeah. And Amari Cooper also is a weekly winner's ass pick where he has that elite ceiling that can blow the top off. And that's what you need. And he, even back his days in Dallas, like he would disappear and then all of a sudden he'd throw up a huge week. And that's exactly the player you want for weekly winners. Devonta Smith falls to 44. So this, like, if you guys don't think that this contest isn't soft, like Devonta Smith just fell a full freaking round. Like what? Like what is happening?
And the wide receivers just go lower in general by like almost like a full round. So if you are a wide receiver bro, I do think that weekly winners, you can build some teams that you did not have access to in the regular format just because the price tags are really a lot different.
Do you think people are taking that, you know, RB's hitting the flex, you know, 2x the receiver into play here?
Maybe so, but I think it's sharp. I think that the wide receiver should go a little bit later here. And to be honest, I think that Bestball Mania ADP, the running back should go where they go in here. And I think that ironically, the one with the more market, more liquid market is
less
the
sharp.
one I think is incorrect, but we'll see what happens this year. But yeah, this is a classic team where like we draft a couple running backs in the next couple rounds And then this is where we can really kind of push the button on how many quarterbacks and tight ends we're willing to build with.
Jordan Love just went pick 51. We're gonna
Whoa.
need you to reach out to Numi to just make that disappear.
Unstacked too. Oh, that's clean. That's clean best
just
ball. You can draft whoever you want in round 5. It's up to me.
just forget about that. Who do you like here?
T. Higgins is interesting. Same thing with Christian Kirk and Hollywood. I think I would go Christian Kirk or T. Higgins here.
Okay.
I like Christian Kirk because that's another outlet for stacking. T. Higgins is you can also stack with Joe Burrow and play. Jamar Chase got injured this year, and now it's T.
Ooh,
Higgins. So
I
I think
like
there's
that.
contingent upside with T. Higgins, and also for the same thing we talked about a lot. If we think that T. Higgins and Jamar Chase is negative EV, well, what 25% of the T. Higgins teams also have Jamar Chase. So if T. Higgins is the guy you need, well, we could chop off 25% of the teams that we're competing with, where AJ Brown just scores more points than Jamar Chase that week, and all of a sudden we have the leverage play. So he's like weirdly like a contingent play and leverage off of another first round wide receiver.
So basically, different example for the people in the chat. You could have T. Higgins get like whatever 22 points, finish as wide receiver 4. You could even have Jamar Chase score 20, 21 points, but AJ Brown puts up 22, 23, and then you could still have Burrow finishes as QB1. It's a thinner outcome, obviously, because you're battling against the Hurts spike week if you're getting a AJ Brown spike week. But if both of these guys hit, you could hit some middle outcome there at QB where maybe none separate, and you get the points that way.
Yep. Yeah. Jamar Chase, if Jamar Chase can have 18 points and he's not going to be the weekly winners in the weekly winners first place lineup, because that's just not enough points for your first round draft pick. So yeah, I think that's kind of like an easy way to think about it. It's like all you need is AJ Brown to finish with one more point, that 0.1 point more than Jamar Chase, and then all of a sudden it's the better play. And I think that happens way more often than people kind of think.
I sort of like David Montgomery here for the same reasons, like leveraging elite pieces that go much earlier.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. You're just, if Jamar Chase misses some time, or even if it doesn't, and David Montgomery scores 2-3 touchdowns in a game, and all of a sudden you have him, and we've completely punted off week 5. Like once we have our second round pick, like we got to lean into it. Like that's the other interesting thing about like the column I wrote is like, you can take the exact inverse and you can get some EV as well. I don't think it's like the best way to approach it, but you could inverse everything I wrote about and say, I'm only going to draft rookies. I'm going to pull out the week 16 schedule and I'm going to build a team like that. There is some EV there. I just think it's a little harder to kind of play that game. So it's not my go-to strategy, but you can kind of flip the build.
Yeah, going Nick Chubb, going Brooks, going some of these players maybe like that are getting suspended that
all the rookies,
you're not going to lean into early, and you're getting that discount on those players that are suspected to get suspended. All the rookies, like that's another great strategy. And
just don't combine them. Those two teams, like those two teams should look like completely different from each other.
But yeah, you're leveraging with the DeMont pick, like you're leveraging Amon-Ra, Gibbs, Laporta, and right there already 3 players in the top 4 rounds, and Laporta's an early 4th rounder. Like that's the way you should be thinking. That's why Pacheco is such a good pick in this contest, just leveraging all the KC pieces.
Yep. And when David Montgomery does hit, you're not pulling up quarterbacks and stuff. It's like David Montgomery hit, you're not worried about the Jared Goff stuff. So that's another reason why I like the early round running backs is if you draft Saquon Barkley, for example, well, all the AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts teams, they're not going to project well. And that's a lot of the picks going early on. So some of the robust RB builds with playing on elite teams like Pacheco and stuff, you're also chopping off a lot of the field that has the pass catchers in those environments.
Right. That narrative for your team is, you're chopping off those players those weeks and then just propelling, really leaning in. It's the draft like you're right contest to the next degree.
Yep.
We should be able to push Burrow around, obviously the Chase team to our left. Do we want to go RB here?
I think I would take Burrow because he's already after ADP. I'm not sure if I love Ramondre or Aaron Jones enough. We could try it.
I don't think anyone's gonna go Burr.
Okay, let's push it then.
Who's your fave RB? Stevenson
Um,
White.
Stevenson. I would go Najee. This is fine
Oh,
too.
it's
Ramonder's good. Ramonder's good.
I should have queued him. I should
No,
have
no,
queued
we're
him.
good. Ramonder's totally fine.
If we don't go Ramondre too, say we go Najee, then we could. I mean, we have a pretty good start for maybe targeting week 14 randomly, as well
Mhm.
as just like an extra strategy, one of those heavy bye weeks, not having anyone on week 14. But I do like the build so far where we're leaning into RB hitting the flex. Let's
And
see
we
if
already have two options for our flex. So like to me, this is a build where we're gonna have a ton of running back or a ton of quarterbacks and tight ends, maybe even going four on one of the positions, just because like not only have we filled our wide receiver and our running back spots, but we've also have two different options in the top seven to be in our flex. And obviously, we'll still draft a couple more at those positions, but we're very heavy into filling our flex already.
I love it. Do you guys think Kelsey Laporta duo would be good in this contest? You
I don't.
know, if you're gonna go double elite and like, I definitely wouldn't add Laporta as the first tight end off the board. The pressure is already on for him to have to smash. If you're gonna do it, like Kittle seems like the clear. Okay, I can hit the flex guy.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, we
good
push
call on
Joe
Burrow.
Burrow. It's
Yep.
just typically no one's gonna pull him on the team unless they have Chase. We know Chase is to our
Mhm.
left. We got a full round of
And the other
whatever
teams had
value.
quarterbacks. I think all four of them
Exactly.
behind us. So yeah, I think it was a good call there. But yeah, on the elite tight end stuff, I barely even like it in Best Ball Mania. But in Best Ball Mania, at least you can tell yourself the story where Kelsey goes off 1 week, and then all of a sudden he's on 50% of the teams, and then all of a sudden Sam Laporta, who was not on, he's only on 8% of the teams. Then he goes off, and now all of a sudden you kind of ping ponged it, and it's a leverage play based off of how many teams are going to have those guys in the finals. It's a tough story. It's possible, but in this, we just need one tight end. And
Hmm.
I think that you don't want your tight end filling your flex. I think that's a bad sign. In theory, both tight ends can have 24 and 22 points in a week
Yep.
and they go nuts. But yeah, I don't like to play for these like crazy outcomes. Like let's just like back to the basics. We have Joe Burrow throwing 3 touchdowns to T. Higgins. Like
Right. Right.
that's the kind of game I like to play.
There's definitely more data supporting different drafting strategies than trying to hit the nut outcome of
Yep.
nut outcomes.
Yeah.
And you had tight end hitting the flex about 8% of the time versus RB at 60 and receiver
Yeah.
at 31. So it's
That's tough. And I would guess like those are like the lower scoring weeks in general where the
right.
tight ends did that. And
Right.
yeah, like
The,
it's a lot.
probably somewhere in the bye weeks as well, where right, you're saying like the flex instead of being 22 to 24 points might have dipped down to 18 to 20.
Right. Yeah. It's possible. A lot of things are possible. You can tell yourself plenty of stories on here, but I like to tell
Hmm.
the ones that happen enough times and the ones I can still kind of build smart teams and leverage off of what other people are doing.
Deontay Johnson goes at 92. Just curious. Yeah, he should go a little later in this
I love
contest,
that
but
pick.
but
Yeah.
92 seems too late still.
Yep. I agree. Okay, so we get Ninjoku gets taken from us for that Amari Ninjoku team. That's fine.
Yeah.
Um, I would say like Joe Burrow, Deshaun Watson. I do think that is okay to do.
Hmm.
That's like not too much draft capital into the quarterback position. Especially if we already have two flex options through week 7 or through round 7.
B Rob off.
I
I
like
guess.
Cortland Sutton here because Bo Nix goes undrafted so often, and we're going to be drafting potentially uh, 3 or 4 quarterbacks. So you're kind of setting up a low ownership play. Same thing with Rashid Shaheed with Derek Carr. I personally like Sutton over Rashid Shaheed, but
I like it.
I can be open to being swung there.
Yeah, I think if there's another if there is another running back or QB or tight end that you absolutely want here, like if Njoku's here, I'm okay with flip flopping Sutton for Lockett,
Hmm.
flip flopping not as much for Brandon Cooks, but because you are for Brandon Cooks, you're basically looking for a 2 touchdown game.
Yep. All right, I'm gonna pull up. So the Bengals schedule week. So obviously no teams on bye week 4. We have somebody on week 5 bye, right? We have somebody on week 6 bye already.
Right. Yep.
How about week 7?
We're good. We're clear.
Okay, so week 7 might be the part of the year or the schedule that we want to attack because the Bengals play the Browns in week 7. We don't have any buys. We already have Amari Cooper. So I think week 7 could be all of a sudden now that we have enough kind of our core built. Now we kind of pull up the week 7 schedule and really start like looking at other players that kind of correlate with each other. So like the Dolphins, for example, in week 7, they play the Colts. So some Colts players can make sense. That's a little bit harder of a team to kind of pull off. We're back on the clock, though. We should pick a good player without a week 7 bye, I would say.
Yeah, we have Colts options too later with Downs or AD.
Gus or Lockett, I guess.
Okay. Are you into Spears?
I can go with Spears. Yeah,
Let's go.
Yeah, that works.
Let's go Spears here.
Yeah, that works.
Leveraging enough pieces with the click, and it seems like it's still sort of unknown what they're going to do with Spears and Pollard. Probably expecting some sort of like 45-55 split potentially to even start, but Pollard also making some great plays in camp. I don't know if you saw that catch.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Pretty,
Didn't know where that came from.
Pretty nice. So yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. But pick 128. Just looking ahead a little bit, would you start to dip your toes into Pat Fry, or are these picks still too valuable in Charbonnet, maybe AD or Polk? Like, what's the difference for you between Pat Fry's ceiling and Musgrave or Hunter Henry's ceiling? Right.
I think I like Freiermuth's ceiling enough. Also, I believe that Steelers have some correlations somewhere. Well, just like with just with the Bengals in general by being in the same division there. Yeah. So yeah, I think Freiermuth makes some sense for this build. I would not do Dalton Schultz. Obviously, we can't do Chubb because we're playing for like early part of the season. Yeah. I think Freiermuth would make a lot of sense.
All right, let's see if he slips back to us. With Pat Fry, are you around 11 Pat Fry? Are you leaning towards 3 tight ends already with that in mind?
Definitely. Yeah, this is a 3 or 4 tight end build. And then the other thing with Freiermuth is Justin Fields and Russell Wilson go undrafted by already. But even if we percent or assume that both of them are 100%, well, you're splitting the Pat Freiermuth teams in half with which quarterback he's even being stacked with. Right. So, like, to me, this would be all right. Early part of the season, more likely Russell Wilson's going to be on the field. So, like, we can choose Russell Wilson instead of Justin Fields, and all of a sudden, like the Pat Freiermuth teams that are stacked up, it's not with the quarterback nearly as often as other players in this range.
Lockett's here just taunting us.
Please taunt me more. I like it.
Yeah, pick 128 Tyler Lockett.
Love it.
Typically a player that's gonna fall in this style contest, but
yeah, we needed him because we more Geno Smith is fine. It's also a little bit of leverage, contingent based leverage off of JSN and Metcalf. And if you're telling me which part of the season is does Lockett have a chance still? It's that early part of the season, not the late part. So yeah, I think we need some stacking options since we're going to be drafting so many quarterbacks, and Noah Fant obviously going to be a good target for late round tight end as well.
Dooley in the house. What's up, baby? Make sure you guys refollow Dooley. He deactivated his Twitter account and then he just lost everyone. So give Dooley a follow on Twitter, maybe a retweet, help him out. Tom,
Dooley and I did a show on Weekly Winners last year. Dooley and I did.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, Dooley had some good info just from pulling. Exactly, we're pulling that data from BBM3 for the first ever Weekly Winners season, and I think most of it was sharp.
Yep.
I think a lot of it was sticky. The one thing I don't think we knew as much was the RBs hitting the flex at such a high clip. we still had plenty of people going 4 or 5 wide receivers straight, which you're seeing less of now in these rooms. Corum is,
man, I love Corum, man, but
it's interesting, dude.
His upside is just like so obvious, you know.
Yep. Again, like three players in the top 3 rounds, you're leveraging with some Corum touchdowns and a multi-Corum touchdown week. It's just basically the narrative you have to follow here.
Yep, and we've punted off week 5 and week 6 beautifully, like I said. So it's time to lean into to Blake Corum on this team. He would just become Kyron Williams if Kyron Williams goes down. Like,
exactly.
Like, where could you find that level? Like, how is Ty Chandler ever going to touch what Blake Corum's peak ceiling is? It's not happening. It's just purely not going to happen. So
we already saw how McVay wants to use the running backs. If anything
100%.
goes wrong with Kyron versus if anything goes wrong with Aaron Jones.
Yeah.
Because that's the bet you're saying. You're saying, okay, if these 2 outcomes both happen, I need an injury for both of these cases to work. Which one would I like better if it happens? Now, maybe he's targeting something different with game stacks or whatever it may be, but yeah, that's the way you should be thinking. He actually handcuffed himself.
Interesting.
That's the nicest way to say that. That is a fucking terrible strategy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're not doing it. I think in Bestball Mania, it makes some sense. Weekly winners, not so much. Yeah.
Tom dropping a Memby in the live chat. Appreciate you, dude. Tom over at Fantasy Sanctuary. Appreciate you guys. Oh, Deshaun. Logan, a fellow pounder here.
Is he correlated at all?
Joke. Yeah,
that's
joke.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Ninjoku,
Logan's a sharp drafter.
Ninjoku, Deshaun, that's something I definitely want a bunch of.
Don't let the black badge fool you. Logan's a sharp drafter. Polk off at 147's fun.
Yeah, let's pull up some of these guys. Yeah, that's a nice pick. All right, so what about the tight ends? What tight ends are we? Because I'm starting to get a little nervous about tight ends and
fall off at tight end.
Yeah, I like Henry a lot.
I would like 2 of these players.
Of course, Henry goes.
Jonnu in there.
What about the quarterbacks?
Do you want to try to do this basically
yeah,
we'd have to reach a little bit. This is pick 152.
That works with me.
Okay. Yeah, we're not. You don't feel like we're missing out by
maybe Leggett, but
I agree. You could tickle me into Leggett, but we're going to need to hit on tight end anyways.
Yeah, let's get Gino,
because we're gonna get into a gross spot where we're not gonna have as many picks as we need to get that QB stack and to catch up at tight ends.
Yep. And who are our wide receivers again? Just to see how
AJ Brown, Mike Evans, Cooper, T. Higgins, Sutton, Lockett. Like we can lean into some.
This is a 6 wide receiver team, in my opinion, just because our first 4 out of our first 5 picks were receivers, right? Like you only need 3 of them, first of all. So that's 4 for 3 spots. Most likely, I think on half the teams, it's going to be one of the running backs instead of the 4th wide receiver here. But I don't think that we need that many more, especially because Sutton and Lockett have proven upside as well. So I think this is a 6 receiver team, unless there's like
with the scroll, or maybe like a Jalen McMillan,
possibly. But I think that this is going to be a 4 tight end team.
Okay,
just because we don't have one yet.
I could see it. I could see it. I could also see 3 tight ends working, but let's see if
these guys stink.
Did Jonnu already go? Oh God, Jonnu went at 155. Oh my God! All right, it might be tougher to catch up. This guy doesn't have a tight end yet.
I have Noah Fant ranked like 150th in my rankings. I'm happy with locking in.
Yeah, for sure. All the talk around Noah Fant has been great. I still have him 1 pick behind Henry, but I have them both bumped up.
Yep,
a decent amount.
Yep, I agree.
I have Johnny bumped up too, but not here.
That's early. But I think at the end of the draft is kind of the wild west of weekly winners, because like people are kind of mapping out their roster constructions, team stacks, those type of things. You get a little bit wonkier of just where players go in weekly winners Yeah. So I think
even
we probably should
even on our
consider
back-to-back clicks too. Like
we go early.
at this point. We're going and getting our guys.
I agree. Yeah, and like this is now like where we get to the scroll down tier where I'm like, all right, instead of drafting somebody with an ADP of 170, let's consider some 200s. Chop off that drafted rate by more than half, and the projection does not get cut that much.
We already know. We already know.
Yeah, we're that's a lock. And
we already know.
Gesicki might have to be on there as well.
I like it honestly for this team.
It disgusts me, but I do think it's the move. This team it's the Jamar Chase doesn't play the whole year team. You know, like that's like the story.
Or just the down week, even just the down week.
Just the down week.
Are we too tied to like previous tight ends in Cincy where, you know, the crowd has just been hurt too many times and by none else than like Irv Smith Jr., who I couldn't touch last year, even though it was like pick 150. Drafters just seem hurt.
Yeah.
But you also
like
have
had big weeks before. What is what's Gesicki's ADP? Let's just be honest.
He's like in the 2. He's 194.
That's earlier than I want. This might be a Yoshi Voss team and screws Gesicki. I mean, yeah, you could go really nuts with Eric All, but yeah. The problem, I wish Eric All was by himself. There's another rookie tight end over there as well. So maybe we don't do the tight end thing with Burrow here. I think it's in play, but okay.
Scantron, there's dude. We have to start thinking about Ricky? We have to start thinking about Ricky here at pick 176. I feel like, but maybe not. If you want to go,
I think Daniel Jones would be somebody I'd be considering because we're gonna draft another quarterback. What do you think?
Anything else? Tight end?
Chig's fine. Gesicki's fine. Yeah, we're just throwing bodies out there.
I'm trying to find something. Daniel Jones, I think he's going to be too heavily tied to the pass catches this year. I don't think you're going to get that same rushing ability from him with last year's injuries. God, like
it would have been a 7th receiver. We'd have to go with Slayton or Hyatt. Yeah, Hyatt probably. Whoever has the
100%. It's whoever has the lower ADP is the correct way of thinking about it. If Slayton's getting drafted 92% of the time and Hyatt's going 20%, you should just go with the lower guy. It's the same price.
I agree. Yeah, that was a tough call. We need bodies at tight end there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to reference 1 week last year, someone came in first place with a solo Chig.
Yeah.
So his only good week.
Yes.
We also have Baker correlation too, if we wanted to add that third QB with Baker. Obviously,
that works.
We're leaning in a little more Mike Evans than we would like a last round pick Hyatt.
Yeah, I think Baker's okay here. I think my only problem with Baker is like, I'm like, where was his highest finish last year? Because it was a quarterback 5 on a week. I mean, maybe it's like a week where nobody separates, and Baker also has 24 points, and like that's enough. It's harder for Baker to go absolutely crazy, but you have to kind of just picture.
He had a QB2 week. He had a QB2 week. 29 points
against Green Bay.
You know, and then maybe this 24-point week, QB7, but what was QB1, right? What's the point after replacement? If McMillan falls back to us, could be interesting as a last click. But
who are you thinking about?
We have some options. If McMillan falls back,
I think this kind of goes back to like we just need Mike Evans to go completely nuts.
Yeah. I know. If you're betting on Baker though, like how does he get there, right?
I think he gets there by Mike Evans' long touchdown
to Mike A.
Or just like it's a Mike Evans 80-yard touchdown week, and then all of a sudden we're there.
He's in play.
Okay, so I think do we just pull up the tight end tab and find some scroll downs undrafted?
Yeah.
I think Colby Parkinson's fantastic. I like Will Dissly. Will Dissly has a 216 ADP. He's got paid a lot of money for the Chargers. He has two touchdown ability. I think like he's a great one. Dulcich is somebody as well. I would say not Hayden Hurst. Hurst has, I was looking at his contract, $0 guaranteed. I think he's going to make the team, but $0 guaranteed
Is
is
Parham just gonna steal that role
no
though? Like
enough
from
already with
2 yards
Parham.
out, from two
Enough
yards out,
already.
just like
No,
2 catches for 6 yards and 2
no.
touchdowns.
I'd like to see it. Colby Parkins would be my favorite.
Over the correlated Jasek?
Yes, I'm over Gesicki. Colby Parkinson's another one where we are chopping off all the teams with Puka and Cooper Cup and Kyron as well. You know, he scores 2 touchdowns. I mean, the dude is 6'7" playing with Matthew Stafford, Sean McVay. Like he definitely could score 2 touchdowns. He also has enough speed where he, of all the tight ends, I think he does have the chance to score like a 35.
I sort of lean on Dissly being the blocker and Hurst maybe being out there a little more in passing downs. Or it could just
sucks. Hurst stinks.
Without a doubt. That's why they're both in the 18th round.
Yeah. I think Dawson Knox is definitely interesting for us. Or Yoshi Voss. Yeah, I mean,
I think you could tickle me either way.
So we have what? Fant, Jig, and Colby. Okay. I mean, if Yoshi Voss, I would say Knox, Dulcich, and Dissly would be my go-tos. And then Yoshi Voss. I'll leave it up to you. Do we go fancy and go Yoshi Voss? I'm kind of tempted by it.
Ooh. We know the pocket passing QB double wide receiver is not the highest of EV.
But we can survive it
against Chase.
And if T Higgins is not part of it either, where like
I'm cool with it.
We can say Yoshi Voss gets you 20 points. T Higgins either scored 18 or he didn't, and AJ Brown still scores more than Jamar Chase in that week. Like that's like the outcome we played with. But
the scroll down equity as well of like what percent owned is he going to be if he does manage to be, you know, the flex on one of these heavier bye weeks or whatever with 19 points on a lower scoring week. And then if it's a flatter tier, a tight end, or you just get a random double spike week or double touchdown game from any of these guys, or just a flatter week at tight end, and you have the least invested at that position, and you're not losing that many points.
I will say Yoshi Voss, the similarities to Puka, it's actually stunning. First of all, he looks like him. He was a 6th round pick. Puka was a 5th round pick. BYU, Princeton, bigger guys, attached to good offenses. I think that he would need Jamar Chase to miss something like a big chunk of the season for it to happen. But like there are some similarities to Puka, I will say.
God damn it. I'm over here as a Pats fan. Like, you know, Drake May looks a lot like Zach Wilson.
No, he's way better. Drake May's
I like
good.
I like how this one turned out. Burrow, Geno, Mayfield, we get the double stack with Seattle. We get the double stack with Joe Burrow, both pocket passing QBs. Baker Mayfield with Mike Evans. Again, 3 guys basically at tight end. Colby Parkinson not going to be 100% drafted as well. H.A.N. Montgomery, Stevenson, Spears, Corum. It's a good amount of capital spent, especially 3 RBs by 80. Stevenson doesn't leverage the most elite of pieces, but that's okay. A.J. Brown, Evans, Cooper, T. Higgs, Sutton, Tyler Lockett. I'm cool with this. I'm cool with this team. I think we danced around nicely. How often are you going 3 QBs with the Joe Burrow click here?
It is Joe Burrow at 89th overall versus 77th. So I think that helped us out by a round there. I think it was fine because Baker Mayfield also 20 picks after ADP. Like he was sitting at the very top of the queue. So I think you can kind of say that it is a 3 quarterback build. It's not the same price 3 quarterback build. And Baker and Mike Evans, it's so like obviously correlated. I do think that that is an exception there. So discounted prices, very correlated. I would say most Joe Burrow teams probably should be 2 quarterbacks, but I do think in this this sense, it was okay.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely not too much invested here, especially like you said with that fall. We get the fall in Mikey A too. We get a nice little discount there. How many rushing touchdowns did Baker end up with last year? Just one, right? And was it this spike week? It,
It
it
was.
was. Yeah. No, that's a fumble. Touchdown.
Yeah.
No,
He
it was
even fumbled.
actually this week.
Yeah.
He even fumbled. Look at that. Could have been the
He even
difference for
fumbled.
someone.
Exactly.
But guys, check out Hayden's article. Again, I'll link it in the live chat. Just so many sharp points here on macro play, micro play, even on some of the, focus what weeks and where your EV can lie. But mainly, let the draft come to you. Let
right.
your early draft picks sort of dictate which way you're going to go with it. But Hayden, anything else for the people before we take off?
Yeah, if you guys want to play weekly winners, it's now's the time, because I don't think it's going to last very long. It will definitely fill way before Bestball Mania, and I think Bestball Mania might fill late August instead of early September. And yeah, hopefully it becomes more and more popular, so this prize pool can get bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And I think that will help the fill rate for next year. So hopefully next year we get the data out early. Don't know what happened there on the back end. You can blame me, but hopefully, yeah, we get the data out there so more people are doing content. But in the meantime, you take all the views on weekly winners content, help the channel out, and appreciate you having me on.
You guys are just putting out so much like high quality content on the YouTube channel too. You guys, obviously, I think everyone here is already subscribed to it, but watch those videos, like those videos, interact with those videos, help the algorithm out, massage the algorithm a little bit.
Right.
And we'll catch you guys on a stream sometime soon. Again, if you like this video, hit the like, hit subscribe, 24-hour live stream at 2K subs. Appreciate you guys, and we'll catch you on the next one. Pounders.